This being All Saints' Day, I thought it would be appropriate to preach from the book that talks about the end, the final things, the future, the book of Revelation. It is one of the Bible's most commonly referred to and badly misunderstood books. These days, with all the wild and unsettling events in both the local and national and global scene, this book is often referred to, but sadly in a way that sees it as a writing that predicts what's happening in the world now, particularly in the Middle East. I want you to hear this once and for all. I am not normally this direct, but I am going to be very direct today. My wife calls me Mr. Rogers. I am not going to be Mr. Rogers today. I'm just going to lay it on the line. The book of Revelation, in all of its apocalyptic imagery, is not talking about us and the world today. It is primarily referring to the early church's experience with Roman oppression. This book is not about modern-day Israel, Russia, and China. It is about the church in first century Rome, which, by the way, doesn't mean that it doesn't have implications for our lives. In fact, I think it does. I think that it is remarkably relevant for us who now are experiencing so much fear. Revelation is an attempt to encourage people who could easily throw in the towel not to give up. What we have in today's reading from Revelation is what's called an interlude. Some people call it a salvation interlude. Now, interludes are often used in music to provide gaps or pauses or breaks. Sharp pointed out that probably one of the most famous interludes is the one that comes from Jeopardy. Da, 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 da. You know, that is an interlude. An interlude like that, though, is basically wasting time music. It normally is not offering another theme or a theme that everybody has to remember. Last week, Elise played an interlude between verse 3 and verse 4 of A Mighty Fortress. It was just a matter of moving from one style of music to another. But what we have in the book of Revelation is not such an interlude. This is not transition. This is an interruption. An interruption that provides a vision of what is ultimately true. And this vision should not be forgotten by the audience of Revelation, the first century audience, and I would suggest should not be forgotten by us as we travel into the future, and particularly as we travel into the future of Revelation's story. The interlude is a break in Revelation between the past opening of the sixth seal and the upcoming opening of the seventh seal. Seals, by the way, are not wild, they're not animals, water animals. They are what keep the scroll, the book, bound shut. When the sixth seal is open in the book of Revelation, this is such good literature, and you need to understand that. It's wonderful literature. When the sixth seal is open, all kinds of bad things occur. You would not be surprised because 6 is not the Bible's favorite number, all right? So when that sixth seal occurs, you know what happens on the earth? The stars fall to the earth. A great earthquake is experienced. The sun becomes black, and the moon becomes like blood, and the kings of the earth, the rich and the powerful, and we are told everyone, slave and free, hide in the caves. This is a terrible day. The world is falling apart. Oh, this is such good literature. It's almost like what we would call science fiction. In dramatic pictorial form, it describes how awful life can be sometimes. This kind of literature known as, and there'll be a test at the end of the sermon today, all right? This kind of literature known as apocalyptic literature makes sense when life is particularly harsh, when the powers that be seem especially oppressive and ugly, and when it feels like the world as you know it is falling apart. And this kind of literature it specializes in making you think about the end of your own life, and I would suggest, the end of all things. When the world looks particularly menacing and intimidating, apocalypticism tends to thrive. And we're probably living in such an era. I can tell that by the religious TV that I watch, Revelation being quoted all the time these days. So Revelation definitely feels like it resonates with our time. And I think it does, by the way. But I warn you, and again, I'm being strong here, if you don't understand Revelation in its context and comprehend the kind of literature it is, you will get the kind of craziness that we receive from television preachers and authors who give us awful books like the Left Behind series. These folks and these books feed off of people's fears and manipulate them in order to make money off of them. But they represent a terrible distortion of this wonderful book. This book is not meant to cause the saved, which is always us, to think that they will be raptured above all the awful things of life, while the unsaved, well, they're going to have to deal with jet crashes and all that kind of stuff. Actually, the rapture is never, ever mentioned in the book of Revelation. Revelation is not meant to provide the modern-day nation of Israel a star status in the future of the world. It is primarily addressing a minority Jewish Christian community of the first century. And mostly, Revelation is not intended to lead you to fear. It is meant to encourage you in the midst of your fears. And that is what the interlude we received today was trying to do for those who were the first recipients of Revelation. It is reminding them of what is true in the midst of a world that is falling apart. And to grasp this truth, this is typical in apocalyptic literature, we must be taken to heaven, to what is true always and will be true at the very end. In a vision of heaven, we hear this: I looked, and there was a great multitude that no one could count. Those of you who think that the final future is going to include just people like you, who act like you, think like you, have your little card that says you're a Lutheran or a Catholic, I got something else to tell you. The book of Revelation says this final future community has a community that is so large that no one can count. And we are told this is a people of every nation, all tribes and all peoples and all languages. Justo Gonzalez, a Cuban scholar, says that what we have in Revelation is what is called mestizo literature, writings addressed to a people of a mixed cultural heritage. I have a son who is of a mixed cultural heritage. He's biracial, he's black, and he's white. Sometimes, sadly, we want to create or live within so-called pure cultures. Let me say this clearly. That is not the church. That is not the church that needs now to come together in a world that is in perpetual change and feels like it's falling apart. The vision from heaven is of a church that is a wild coming together of diverse folks of every kind, every nation, every language, who are standing before the throne of God and standing before the Lamb. If you are a persecuted minority who wonders what your future holds in light of an oppressive regime like Rome, you now know that you have status. That's what Revelation's trying to tell these folks. You, the persecuted minority, are the ones found before the throne, and so therefore don't give up. Don't give in. They want you to worship the emperor. Don't give in. And notice you also are at the feet of the Lamb. And the Lamb obviously is a reference to Jesus, the Christ. And elsewhere in Revelation, we are told of a lamb that was slain. We sing that in our liturgy sometimes. The lamb that was slain now reigns. That comes from the book of Revelation. They are before the Lamb who reigns, the crucified one. You know, you'd think you would be gathering around a roaring lion, but no, you and they bow at the feet of the Lamb, the crucified one, the one killed on a cross. Wow, this gives them and us a very different vision of what holds community together, what is at the center of our life together. The recipients of Revelation are dealing with an emperor who has loads of money and lots of weapons. He rules how? By power and intimidation. And it appears that he's in charge. And the interlude is saying, no, he's not. There's someone else in charge. It is the Lamb. It is the crucified one who rules. Heaven is telling us that the one who rules is not the one with the most weapons or the most money. No, the crucified one is at the center of the throne. What rules the earth? This is the Christian claim, and it is a wild claim. What rules the earth is not power, but suffering love. And don't let your neighbors or the emperor convince you otherwise. You live within a different story than the story of money and intimidation and power. And is this not what Jesus is saying in the Beatitudes today? Did you hear those marvelous words from Jesus? Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who meek, who have no property. Blessed are those who are merciful. Blessed are those who are peacemakers. He does not say, blessed are the folks who are in charge. Blessed are the rich, the powerful, and the successful, and the oppressive. No, blessed are those who gather at the feet of the slain Lamb. Now, I am sure that you will admit that this is not conventional wisdom. This is not how we think in a world that is dark, is forever changing, and seems to be falling apart. We look around and we think the emperor must be in charge. The bullies must run the show. Do you now understand why we need a little interlude in our lives? An interlude that disrupts the story, that gives us a vision in the midst of the unfolding of the story of what is really real, truly true. Sometimes you and I, amid life, we need to be given a vision of what's really important, what matters. Because, you know, so often we forget. I say it's just about weekly I forget. We get busy living life, responding to life's demands, trying to act like everybody else, thinking that really the emperor is in charge, believing that what runs the show is money, power, and weapons, and we need something to disrupt us, to take us to a message that is not the message we receive daily. By the way, that is the role of Christian worship. It's meant to be an interlude in the week, to give us a vision of what's really in charge in life. And so it doesn't surprise me that in Revelation, in telling its story, it interrupts its narrative with a scene of worship. That's what the faithful, those who have been through the great ordeal, as Revelation says, are doing today. They're worshiping. They are falling before God in worship. Worship, and in our practice, it's weekly worship, is the reminder of what's really real, of what really runs the universe. And we too often forget. We forget who we are, acting as if money and power run the show. Worship is a disruptive interlude, calling us to our senses, taking us to a slain lamb, reminding us that suffering, compassionate love is at the center of what life is all about. So welcome to the church's disruptive interlude. Welcome to worship. And you know, if you think about it, You'll recognize this All Saints' Day also as a disruptive interlude. Sometimes amid busy lives, we need to be taken to death. We need not only to remember those who have died, but be confronted with the truth that we won't live forever either. And we need to be forced to ask bigger questions, questions that have to do not with just this moment or my momentary concerns, but questions that have to do with eternity, which is why Revelation's interlude takes place in heaven. So I pray, disrupt my life, O God. Bring me a giant interlude. Give me a vision of what's really real. Get me beyond my small world. Take me to your suffering, compassionate heart. Assure me, tend to my fears, and be the Lamb who shepherds me and guides me to springs of the water of life. And eventually, O God, wipe every tear from my eyes. Amen.